looks like she didn't leave in such a hurry after all.
Oh, I think this is the episode of Three's Company where there's some kind of misunderstanding.
Then I've already seen this one.
The joke of that is that nearly every single episode of Three's Company involves some type of misunderstanding. You know, where one cast member overhears something, often because they're eavesdropping, and they don't get the whole story, right? Their minds run amok to a conclusion that is usually zany and wacky, and the sequence of events following involve further comical entanglement before being wrapped up neatly and things put in order in a mere 22 minutes. It's a formula that's worked for sitcoms since their beginning. You know, my daughter today is actually right now in labor. And so I had prepared a message for you today, but I'm actually just going to close this in prayer. Yeah. But she really is in labor right now, and I'm doing everything I can to stop my wife from bolting out of here. So, but people, they misunderstand words and phrases all the time, sometimes with comical effects. For example, have you ever misunderstood the lyrics to a song, and then you find out the real lyric later? I mean, I do it all the time. But you may think, I like my lyric better. But really, most of the time you're thinking, wow, how could I have come up with that? Why on earth did I think I heard that word as the lyric? I looked up some of the most misunderstood pop culture song lyrics ever. Yeah, there's actually that out there now. I mean, you can Google about anything. But here were some of my favorites. My first one was, "We built this city on sausage rolls."
We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city.
So it's, we built this city on rock and roll. From Starships, we built this city. Or how about this one? See that girl, watch her scream, kicking the dancing queen. See, the actually correct lyric is, see that girl, watch that scene, digging the dancing queen, from ABBA's Dancing Queen. I mean, kicking the queen, really? I mean, that would almost be like maybe somebody from a Southern Baptist church or something. I don't know. Yeah, so I'm going to ruin all of these songs for you guys. How about this one? Excuse me while I kiss this guy. Anybody think they've heard that one before?
Excuse me while I kiss the sky.
So the correct lyric is, excuse me while I kiss the sky, from Jimi Hendrix's Purple Haze. Or how about this classic 80s tune? This was kind of really popular. Sweet dreams are made of cheese. It's a Wisconsin favorite.
Sweet dreams are made of these. Who am I to disagree? I travel the world and the seven seas.
So sweet dreams are made of these, from the Eurythmics. All right, how about, I can see clearly now, this is kind of appropriate for today. I can see clearly now, Lorraine is gone.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone.
I can see clearly now the rain is gone, from Johnny Nash's album, I Can See Clearly Now. Or this one was one of my favorite songs because I like to ride a motorcycle. And this is what I heard all the time, and I never could understand it because it really didn't make sense to me. It was like a Jew needs a child. I don't know why Jewish people would need the child, but...
Exploding space like a true nature child. We were born to be wild.
So the correct lyric is like a true nature's child from Steppenwolf's Born to Be Wild. And then finally, from one of my favorite bands, One Republic, you just heard the song earlier played by the band, We'll Be Counting Farts. Apparently that's appropriate for that line. But it's We'll Be Counting Stars. So now every time the band plays that song here, it's going to be ruined for you. And it could also be counting farts, right? Hey, it happens. Both farts and song lyrics can be misunderstood. So we are in week 2 of our series, Bad Lip Reading. And there's a lot of things in the Bible that can have a lot of comical effects. You know, people think that the Bible says, or what they think Jesus says, that are actually, in fact, not in the Bible. They're putting words in God's mouth. Things many of you may even think are from the Bible, but are not. So today we're going to be talking about one of my pet peeves, and it is God will never give you more than you can handle. See, I hear that said all the time, and it sounds amazing. I mean, that would be fantastic. Just one problem. It's not actually in the Bible. You might even say it's like a misunderstood song lyric. So we're going to look today in the New Testament of the Bible at what it actually says and where that kind of comes from. And if you didn't know, the Bible is broken up into 2 parts. There's an Old Testament and a New Testament. The Old Testament of the Bible is about life on earth before Jesus came, and the New Testament of the Bible is about life on earth after Jesus came. And if you don't have a Bible, we've got free Bibles over here at the connection spot that you can grab. They're easy to read. You can take them home. They're yours to keep. If you have our Gateway Branson app, you can get to a Bible inside of that. And if you don't have a Bible, not a big deal. We'll put all the verses up on the screen. So we're going to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13, and it is in the New Testament of the Bible. And it says, "He will not allow the temptation to be more than you can stand. When you are tempted, he will show you a way out so that you can endure." See, this verse has often been susceptible to bad lip reading. And it's been misunderstood as God will not give you more than you can handle. But they are very different statements and need to be understood in the proper context. The promise in 1 Corinthians 10:13 is not about God not giving us more than we can handle. It's about God providing a way of escape so that we can endure temptation and not fall to sin. So that statement, see, it's about temptation, not about trials or suffering. And this is very critical to understand because many people feel that when life gives them more they can handle, they conclude that God has let them down. They may even repeat the phrase, God won't give you or me any more than you or I can handle, because they don't want to believe that God would let them down. But this is not something that God has promised. I think this is like one of those phrases that we often hear is, God helps those who help themselves. You know, that's actually not in the Bible either. And I can tell you for an absolute fact that life has brought me more than I can handle on many occasions. And I'm sure the same is true for many of you, if not all of you in here. When you are overwhelmed by the circumstances of your life, should some well-meaning person come up to you and say, remember, God will never give you more than you can handle. Well, that may be the time that you kind of want to punch them in the face. Why? Because that type of rhetoric is not actually helpful at all, right? Not only because it sounds trite, but also because it's not true. But don't punch them, please. First of all, God does not give us bad things. All good things come from God. Look what it says in the New Testament book of 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 4. Since everything God created is good. Now, he can take something bad and use it for good, as Paul tells us in the New Testament book of Romans chapter 8, verse 28. And we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. For instance, many of you here have battled addiction. God did not give you the addiction. Poor choices, people, the world, or the enemy helped create the addiction. But those who have recovered from their addiction have an awesome story to tell because God pulled you out of the pit of despair and has used your past addiction to tell about the saving power of Jesus. So God took something bad and used it for good. What's so ridiculous about the bad lip reading statement of God will never give you more than you can handle is that if that were true, you would never need God. See, the addiction was more than you could handle, but God was the one that saved you from it. If you could save yourself, you wouldn't have been addicted in the first place. It'd be like this, like life. You're walking around with this box of life, and then life throws another box at you. And this one's a little bigger. It's relationships. And you're starting to carry life and relationships. And then life throws another box at you. And it's an addiction. And then life throws another box at you. And it's tragedy. And all of a sudden, you can't handle it. Right? You can't handle it. So if the statement, God will never give you more than you can handle, were true, how do you explain John the Baptist in the Bible? You know, Jesus said, there was no one greater born among women, which is all of us, by the way. That's what he said about John the Baptist. But how did John the Baptist's story end? He was beheaded. I'm pretty sure that was more than he could handle. So, for those of you who aren't familiar with John the Baptist, he was the cousin of Jesus. He was a prophet that was sent as a forerunner to the coming of Jesus to point the people of Israel to their long-promised Messiah. And he'd done just that, even publicly proclaiming in front of hundreds of people that Jesus would take away the sins or the wrongs of the world. And then he even baptized Jesus in the Jordan River. You see, he knew who Jesus was. He was sold out that Jesus was the Savior of the world. And there was no way you would be able to convince John the Baptist otherwise. But eventually, John the Baptist ended up sitting in King Herod's filthy prison. King Herod was a wicked king of the region, and John was pretty outspoken. And he would publicly oppose wicked kings who did things outside of God's will. It'd be like the 1920s newspaper kid that would stand on the corner and say, extra, extra, read all about it. Except they didn't have printing presses then, so he'd be like, extra, extra, hear all about the wickedness of the king. And he would just tell people what was going on. So it really wasn't a surprise to John that he could end up in prison. But in this particular case, he had called out King Herod for marrying his brother Philip's wife, Herodias, while she was still married to Philip. And Herodias, King Herod's bride, wanted John dead for doing that. See, people don't like to be called out when they're doing things wrong. And they get kind of feisty about that, and they want people to be quiet. They want to continue to do what's wrong. But what John hadn't expected was to be tormented by such oppressive thoughts and fears while he was sitting in jail. See, since the day he proclaimed that Jesus was the Savior of the world, John had not doubted who Jesus was. He knew that Jesus was sent from God. But now he's stuck alone in this putrid cell, and he's being just assaulted with accusing thoughts. What if he'd been wrong? What if Jesus wasn't who he said he was? There'd been many false prophets in Israel. What made him so sure that Jesus wasn't one of them? What if he'd led thousands of people astray? So these thoughts are just overwhelming him, and he decides that he's going to send two of his disciples, his closest friends, to ask Jesus if he really is who he says he is. So let's look in the New Testament book of Luke, chapter 7, verse 20. And it says, John's two disciples found Jesus and said to him, John the Baptist sent us to ask, are you the Messiah we've been expecting, or should we keep looking for someone else? Jesus' response is stunning. See, Jesus, he was familiar with John's sorrows and his grief and the attacks that Satan brings on people when they are weak and vulnerable. See, Jesus, he loved John. So with John's faithful friends present, he started healing many people and delivered many people from their own demonic prisons. And then he turned to John's friends and he said this in verse 22. Go back to John and tell him what you have seen and heard. The blind see, the lame walk, the lepers are cured, the deaf hear, the dead are raised to life, and the good news is being preached to the poor. See, Jesus knew that John would certainly recognize Isaiah's prophecy 700 years earlier in Isaiah 61:1 from what Jesus was saying. And this promise, it would bring the peace John needed to sustain him for the few difficult days he had remaining. And when Jesus had sent John's friends away, he said something else stunning about John. In verse 28, I tell you, of all who have ever lived, none is greater than John. And Jesus says this right after John's friends question him about who he is. And right after that, John's beheaded. You see, God does not always answer with the speed we desire, nor is his answer always the deliverance we hope for. But he will always send his grace, and that will always be sufficient for those who trust in him. And that he has promised. So today I'm submitting to you that God will definitely give you more than you can handle. Or at the very least, allow life to happen in ways that result in you and me and all of us sometimes feeling very overwhelmed. And that is actually a good thing for you and I. So what I'm going to do is make this a little more personable. I'm going to explain how I have experienced this truth. In fact, I'm going to give you 3 beneficial reasons why God allows life to throw some very wicked curveballs at me. So the first reason is, if God didn't give me more than I could handle, or actually allow life to do so, I would never ask for help or understand the benefit of community. So, first confession. Left to my own devices, I don't like to ask for help. I'm the guy that will drive around for 4 hours lost before I will stop and ask for directions. You know, I'm the one who doesn't like to feel dependent on anyone or anything. In other words, I got issues, people. And I've shared this before, but in November of 1993, my wife was killed in a freak car accident. We had a daughter at the time that was 2.5 years old. And I'd been a high school and college wrestler. I'd been a youth wrestling coach, junior high and high school wrestling coach. So I could pretty much navigate boys. You know, I could kind of figure that thing out. But not girls. And here I was with a 2-year-old girl now, by myself. I was literally panicked inside. What do I do first? What if I do things wrong? Will I screw this kid up forever? And so many more questions. You know, there's hair and all that kind of stuff, and just... My parents were living in Baltimore, Maryland at the time, and I have no siblings. Yes, I'm an only child, which is another reason why I'm probably screwed up. But, you know, I didn't have anyone close. And the first couple of weeks, if you've ever experienced any type of tragedy or loss in your family, you always have lots of people that will help. But if you're like me and don't ask for that help, after a couple of weeks, things just kind of go back to regular routine for most people. But several people kept showing up in my life and encouraging me and helping me. There was actually a lady from my hometown that lived here in Branson. You know, obviously that was a God thing, and her name was Kay. And she helped clean my house and prepared some meals, and her kids would even come and babysit my daughter so I could get some other things done. And then there was my mom. She moved here from Baltimore while my dad stayed there and worked. And she came and cooked and cleaned and helped me get my daughter to different places and encouraged me. Their sacrifice in the midst of my plight makes me think of how great it will be for them when they hear the words like these from Jesus. For I was hungry and you fed me. I was thirsty and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger and you invited me into your home. I was naked and you gave me clothing. I was sick and you cared for me. I was in prison and you visited me. Then these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you were doing it to me. Because at that time of my life, I definitely felt like a least of these. And they definitely deserve a well done, my good and faithful servant. See, those circumstances, along with Kay and my mom's sacrifice, they have reminded me that we are people who need help. And at some point in our life, and many times in some bizarre fashion, it positions us to then help others in their life later on. And that leads me into my second reason, which is this. If God didn't give me more than I could handle, or life didn't give me more than I could handle, I would never entrust him with my circumstances, as I would always choose myself as the primary navigator of my life. As I've already confessed, I don't like to ask for help, and now you know I'm an only child as well, and so it's been very clear that why I'm so screwed up. But I can tell you that the trials of my wife's death compared to nothing as my first year that I came to faith. There were some very dark moments for me. I had just come to faith. I remarried. I had an immediate blended family of 6 with 4 teenage girls. So I just told you that I was panicked about taking care of 1, and now I have 4. God has a way of humbling people through a sense of humor, I think. So I was feeling inept in my marriage that I wouldn't be able to provide well. And hearing things like, you're failing at your relationship with your wife, your new kids don't like you, and your own kids don't think much of you at the time either. So one day I'm having one of those shake fisting moments with God. And I was wondering if God had abandoned me, or if God had cursed me, or if God was trying to teach me some lesson. Just what was the deal here? So I'm doing battle with God, and I'm kind of arguing with him. I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm hurt. And I remember finally saying these exact words: I surrender. I can't do it anymore. I need you. Now, some of you that know me, and those that don't know me, know that I can be quite sarcastic sometimes. And it's not unlike God to address me in a similar manner. And then he just throws that humility in there as well to top it off. And I've gotten used to it. It really doesn't bother me now. It actually is what I need. It's how I think he relates to me. So I say, I surrender. I can't do it anymore. I need you. And immediately I hear this return thought, this still voice in my head that says, it's about time. Which was very, very sarcastic sounding. And I say, it's about time? Really? Hello? Haven't you been paying attention to what's going on? This has been a difficult year. I'm trying to be sold out for you, and I keep getting things thrown at me left and right. You could have jumped in at any point along the way here. And I want to be clear when I say I heard a still small voice. It's not like I audibly hear from God. I don't hear him go, Brian, Brian, Brian. It's about time. It's not like that. It's more like just a revelation, just an idea, a thing pops in your head. It was a thought that had been planted. And so the next thought that I felt or I heard was, you're finally ready to let go of being in control so that I can show you some things you weren't ready for. The end of you is where I begin the best work. And that was true. One of the many things I have come to love about Jesus is that he is very upfront about things as it pertains to us in this life. He once said in the book of John in the New Testament, chapter 16, verse 33, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart, I have overcome the world. See, up to that point in my life, I was doing work for God, but I was still clinging to a lot of my own ambition. I'd always worked really hard and wanted God to be a part of that hard work. What I was still learning, though, was that God wanted me to work very hard at finding joy in Him. As it turned out, God didn't care about my FICO score or if I paid my bills on time, because every time I brought those struggles up, He would just respond with, "How are we doing, you and I? Are we spending time together?" Which leads me to reason number 3. If God didn't give me more than I could handle, I could never be part of something bigger than myself. This is something that I've always longed for, but I can never achieve that left to my own selfish devices and desires. You know, I could never imagine that I would be up here speaking to you about a God that has broken me down so many times, but continues to restore me for the good things He's planned. And it's great. I mean, it is great. And at the risk of sounding even crazier than I am, I feel way more blessed than things I can handle. If God didn't allow for more than I can handle, then I couldn't be blessed beyond my ability to understand. And often I feel that way. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying everything comes up roses for me, but I am filled with tremendous gratitude for what God is doing here amongst us at Gateway. And I'm overwhelmed that I get to be a part of this, and I get to be able to do this with my wife, Amy. And we would not be a part of it had we not gone through those overwhelming seasons that preceded it. There's just no way we would be here right now. This was not on our radar. We were never going to be part of a church whatsoever in any way. But I believe it was on God's mind the whole time. Next year, we'll be celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Jesus Was Homeless. And the 6-year anniversary of starting the church. And I, like many of you, believe that the next 10 years are going to be the best 10 years. And I get to be a part of it. Something way bigger than I could ever do on my own or by myself. And my part is something that almost seems like God created it for me. You know, I've had the privilege of being mentored by John Burke, our senior pastor in Austin. He's a great guy, a humble leader. He's an awesome visionary. And I know you're thinking, oh, you're just sucking up because he's going to be here next week, but I don't care really, because it's true. I get to work with an amazing staff here and volunteers and you guys, really a family of people that are on mission together to reach people far from God that need Jesus to bring them life and freedom. And look, nobody's ever going to accuse me of being Pollyanna. I'm not the guy that would stand in the middle of a hurricane and go, oh, I'm so happy God is blessing us with rain. That's not me. I know things aren't always great, and I know that many of you are going through a lot less than great circumstances right now. But God will expose even the smallest light, especially in dark places. Maybe today is a day that you have more than you can handle, that life has thrown some curveballs at you. Maybe today is the day that you will ask God for help for the very first time. He wants to help you, but He wants you to ask Him for that help. He won't force Himself on you. So as we close with some music from the band, I really want you to consider inviting Jesus into your life because he wants to take your burdens. He wants to help you carry the things that life throws at you. The band's going to sing some songs, to God and for God, and you can sit, you can stand. We'll put the words up on the screen. And if you are here today and you have more than you can handle right now in your life, today is the time that you need to ask for Jesus most. Ask him to take your burden and begin a relationship with him today. If you've been coming to Gateway for a while, you know we don't pressure you to give, which is why we don't pass an offering bucket here. But if Gateway is your church home, we give out of the gratitude of what God has done for us. And you can give online at our website at gatewaybranson.org, or we've got buckets and giving stations back there in the back by the doors. If you're new here today, this is just our gift to you. If you would like somebody to pray with you today and for you today, there's going to be people over here by the garage door and people over by that door over there. So if you've got more than you can handle and you don't know where to begin, go over there and let them pray for you. Listen to these songs from the band.
I hear the Savior say,